Hey there, silly geese, quackers, welcome back. We're here with part 4 of the Catching Fire is a Great Film Adaptation series. Remember, we are looking at how the films honor the original text and characters, whether it's showing the same story that we see in the books. Let's head to 11.
Whoa.
We don't get this in the movie, but I do want to talk about a scene that's missing here. Before Katniss and the team arrive to District 11, Effie wakes her up at the crack of dawn for prep. Obviously, they cut the scene because in the movie we're kind of on a time crunch. We have 2 hours to cover everything. But it's worth noting because a lot of people talk about Panem as though it's gender neutral. And yes, men and women are working and fighting and leading throughout the series. We still see differences in gender expectations in moments like these where Katniss has to wake up early for prep and Peeta is allowed to sleep in. Peeta's team is probably still asleep. Doesn't he need prepping? I ask. Not the way you do, Effie replies. It is easy for us to take this interaction for granted because in our real world, we expect women to put effort into their appearance. That doesn't change the fact that in Panem, we still see that women are expected to invest more time into an idealized version of appearance than men are, without their choice and without their consent. This is important because Katniss's lack of bodily autonomy is a theme that runs throughout these books and the film repeatedly ignores. It's also during this scene that we see that Capitol people, specifically Katniss's prep team, expect to be able to make alterations to Katniss's body without consulting her. Let's take a look at that conversation. Flavius tilts up my chin and sighs. It's a shame Cinna said no alterations on you. Yes, we could really make you something, says Octavia. When she's older, says Vinia almost grimly. Then he'll have to let us. I mentioned this a bit in part 2 of the series when we talk about how Katniss comments on Snow's lips. Capital culture practically demands alterations. In the prep team conversation, they are talking about applying those standards to Katniss as a victor, as a product for the public. And the fact that they don't even question whether or not this would be necessary suggests that this is a deeply embedded part of their culture. When you look at the prep team in the films, you might recognize them as looking ridiculous because according to our beauty standards, they do. But the film doesn't, and honestly couldn't probably do these characters justice. So let's take a look at their descriptions real quick. Vinia is described as having aqua hair that sticks out in sharp points all over her head, with gold tattoos around her eyes. Octavia is plump with light evergreen skin, and Flavius has orange corkscrew hair. Katniss even comments on how Octavia's skin shifting from pea green to light evergreen is likely to be the result of Octavia following the rapidly changing trends of the capital. And to be clear, this woman has managed to change the color of her entire body in the approximately 6 months since the last time Katniss saw her. In the capital and in Panem more broadly, bodies are meant to serve the culture, meant to serve the state, either through following these ever-changing trends as a way to distract the capital people or through manual labor that we see happen in the districts. But that's really its own video. That said, I can imagine why Hollywood wouldn't want us to look too carefully at how bodies are remade to be acceptable for audience consumption.
This is not very festive.
The mayor will make some introductory remarks, and then you just have to say a few words.
I like
it's
how they
customary,
handle
of
this.
course, to give a brief eulogy to the district's fallen tributes. For 11, that's Thresh and Rue.
I can do the talking if you want.
The victors of the 74th Hunger Games, Katniss Everdeen and Peeta Mellark.
Ooh, I never really noticed this before, but we have Katniss in this black outfit. She's wearing, I don't know, this vest and a pair of pants in black. And it reads as strong and maybe even respectfully mourning the tributes that were lost. Maybe. And that would be totally appropriate for Katniss and her relationship to District 11. But Katniss is very clear that the purpose of the victory tours is to force the districts to celebrate the deaths of their children. And in that context, black is not appropriate. So what does she wear to the District 11 victory tour ceremony? A pretty orange frock, patterned with autumn leaves. There are a few reasons why this costume change is significant. There's the color thing that I already mentioned, but there's also the shape of it. After her victory in the 74th Games, Katniss is almost always wearing extremely feminine clothing because her team wants to convey that she's just a girl in love. Katniss realizes this with the candlelight dress that she wears for the post-games interview. And this stays pretty consistent until she has to go back to the Capitol for the Quell. The choice to portray her in a top and pants, in black no less, conflicts with the image that they needed to portray post-games. So, again, worth noting.
He put down the cards.
Though they fought,
Why do
they
I
lived with
bother?
honor and dignity until the end. Both Thresh and Rue were so young, but our lives aren't just measured in years. They're measured in the lives of people we touch around us. We know that without Rue and without Thresh, we wouldn't be standing here today. So in recognition of that, knowing that it in no way can make up for your loss, we'd like to donate 1 month of our winnings to the families of the tributes every year for the rest of our lives.
Oh, shit. Can you do that? I can't.
At this point in their victory tour, it is completely fine for Katniss and Peeta to share personal remarks. In fact, it's encouraged. It would not have been that big of a deal for Peeta to not be reading off the cards at this point. What is a big deal is what he says in his personal remarks. I love that they gave us Haymitch's reaction and Cinna's reaction in this moment. Love it. Great addition.
I just wanted to say that
We just saw Katniss step up to the mic because she was, I don't know, maybe moved by seeing Rue's face up there. But in the book, it was the reproachful look of one of Rue's sisters that shames Katniss into speaking after her time to speak had already passed. Now, let's listen to what Katniss has to say about each of the tributes.
I didn't know Thresh. I only spoke to him once. He could have killed me, but instead he showed me mercy. That's a debt I'll never be able to repay.
First, I think it's really important that we acknowledge something very important about how Katniss sees Thresh in the first book that we didn't get to see in the movie, because it would have been hard to include. Katniss deeply admires Thresh before the games even start because he refuses to play the games on the Capitol's terms, in a way that she couldn't. Thresh is a big, strong young man, and his brand, if you want to call it that, was silence. And Katniss is also pretty clear that silence is often dissent in Panem. During his interview, he would answer with single syllables or with nothing at all, and she envied and admired his ability to do that. So what Book Katniss says in her remarks to his family is more moving because she honors that about him. I didn't know him, but I always respected him for his refusal to play the games on anyone's terms but his own. The careers wanted him to team up with them from the beginning, but he wouldn't do it. I respected him for that. And as I said, this is a moving moment for his family, but it's also a political statement that Katniss didn't fully realize she was making on national television. Because what she just said was, I wish I didn't have to play by the rules. Thresh didn't, and I admire that about him. How do you think the Capitol would have read that? Now, let's see what she says to Rue's family.
I did know Rue. She wasn't just my ally, she was my friend. I see her in the flowers that grow in the meadow by my house. I hear her in a Mockingjay song. I see her and my sister Prim. She was too young. Too gentle.
The movie handles this part pretty well, until we get to this.
And I couldn't save her.
This is an unbelievable thing to say in this situation. There is no world in which Katniss could have saved Rue. Only one of the two of them could have gotten out. Katniss could have sacrificed herself for Rue, but she couldn't save her from the games. Which leads us to the next very odd thing Katniss says in the film.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Instead, Book Katniss says, "Thank you for your children," to both families before moving on to thanking the whole district for sending her bread. We discussed when we did the adaptation series for the Hunger Games that we did not get the scene. Instead, we saw District 11 riot when Rue died, and I had plenty to say about that then. But what we see in the film here, where Katniss says, "I'm sorry," is that Katniss is taking responsibility for a situation she had no control over. I'm sorry in this moment. In this situation, Katniss is accepting responsibility for something she had no control over. Because we, the humans not in Panem, are watching her as the hero of this story with the awareness of her position within the coming rebellion. We might not see this as particularly unusual. It just looks like Katniss is expressing empathy or regret. But Katniss isn't responsible for the deaths of Rue and Thresh, no more than anyone else in that crowd. They're all part of the same system. The one where children are taken from their districts and forced to play in death games for the entertainment of the capital people and the punishment of the districts. Katniss didn't create that system, and she had no power to save them from it, so it's wrong for her to apologize here. Having Katniss thank the families rather than apologize acknowledges the sacrifice they've had to endure without her having to take on that responsibility. Katniss is just a 16-year-old girl in an impossible situation. Katniss thanks Rue and Thresh's families in the same way that we, at least in the States, thank our service members, as an acknowledgement of cost. This moment in the movie is moving. The old man whistles and salutes, and others look around before joining him in this show of support, and it costs him his life. That said, it is significantly different from what we see in the books. The old man does whistle, but let's look at what Katniss describes as happening after that. What happens next is not an accident. It's too well executed to be spontaneous, because it happens in complete unison. Every person in the crowd presses the 3 middle fingers of their left hand against their lips and extends them to me. It's our sign from District 12, the last goodbye I gave Rue in the arena. This is the first evidence of mobilization in the books. We see that district people are coordinating politically. It's not tentative support in response to a moving speech. It's a planned demonstration. At this point, Katniss's mic is cut. She and Peeta head back inside. Katniss realizes that she left the bouquet she was given back outside, so she and Peeta go out to get it, and that's when they see the old man executed. This is also significant because we are not seeing peacekeepers killing people in front of Katniss and her team. They were not meant to see this violence, and Katniss doesn't rush to save the man. Instead, peacekeepers block their view and force them back inside. And crucially, their team doesn't know what happened. The feed was cut after Katniss's speech, so the salute, the violence, they didn't see any of that. And even Katniss and Peeta's speeches were cut from the broadcast that was sent out to the rest of Panem, though I'm sure Snow saw all of it. Peeta and Katniss lie to Effie when she asks about the sound, and then they hear 2 more gunshots, and that's when Haymitch takes them upstairs.
You two have a very simple task.
I never meant for anyone to get killed. He has to know that.
What are you talking about? Who has to know what?
Snow, he came to see me. He's worried about rebellion in the districts. He thinks that they don't believe our love story.
You should have told me that before I went out there and tried to give these people the money. Okay, people that I need to protect.
What about them? Who protects them?
Right, so Haymitch leads them upstairs, then PETA explains what just happened out on the veranda. In the film, we hear that Katniss has been carrying the weight of her conversation with Snow alone, but that is not what happened in the book. She actually tells Haymitch about that conversation on their first night on the train. They leave the train at what I think is a fuel stop because they don't want to be overheard, because again, they think that they are under near constant surveillance, and Katniss shares the conversation with Snow. And that's when Haymitch makes her situation clear to her. You and PETA, you'll be mentors now. Every year from here on out. And every year they'll revisit the romance and broadcast the details of your private life, and you will never, ever be able to do anything but live happily ever after with that boy. And as we'll see here in a minute, they combined that conversation with this one in the Justice Building. So let's look at that.
Katniss, what were you thinking?
I was thinking about Rue. Please just help us get through this.
This trip, girl, wake up. This trip doesn't end when you get back home. You never get off this train. You two are mentors now. That means that every year they're gonna drag you out and broadcast the details of your romance. Every year, your private life becomes theirs. From now on, your job is to be a distraction, so people forget what the real problems are.
So what do we do?
You're gonna smile, you're gonna read the cards that Effie gives you, and you're gonna live happily ever after. Think you can do that?
So they just kind of smush those conversations together, which is efficient for runtime, but it does change who Katniss is and the way that she has and maintains relationships. Book Katniss almost never processes or handles things on her own. Katniss is not an independent planner. She almost always seeks counsel. And as a 16-year-old girl in a political system that is trying to kill her, that's not a bad thing. But in the apparent girl bossification of her character, they don't show her seeking help when she needs it. So Katniss never builds the level of trust or dependence on Haymitch that makes this scene and a lot of the rest of this book happen. What happens in the book is that after PETA explains what happened out on the veranda, Haymitch instructs Katniss to share about her conversation with Snow. I tell PETA everything as calmly as I can. About President Snow, the unrest in the districts. I don't even omit the kiss with Gale. I lay out how we are all in jeopardy. How the whole country is in jeopardy because of my trick with the berries. I was supposed to fix things on this tour, but obviously all I've done is get 3 people killed and everyone in the square will be punished. Then I made things worse by giving the money, says PETA. Suddenly he strikes out at a lamp that sits precariously on a crate. This has got to stop. Right now. This game you two play, where you tell each other secrets but keep them from me. Obviously, the whole star-crossed lover thing started with PETA and Haymitch keeping a secret from Katniss, but, you know, PETA's stressed and he just saw someone die, so we're just gonna not worry about that at the moment. But this interaction does show that Haymitch has a pattern of determining who gets what information and when, and particularly for this book, that's important. The movies also show a more conscientious Haymitch than we get in the books. If I remember correctly, the only time we see Haymitch do anything that is in concern for the people outside, it's when District 2 is about to fall during the war and he asks Katniss to give a speech in order to save lives. He does not ask what about them in this interaction. Instead, the scene ends with Katniss finding out that Haymitch chose Katniss's survival over PETA's. I'm gonna stop us here. When I originally planned this series, I expected to be able to cover all of the Victory Tour in one video, but this stop in District 11 is doing so much narrative work that I can't justify rushing past it. This stop shows us how Katniss's body is seen sort of as public property, how responsibility is misassigned, how dissent is reframed, and how collective political action is softened into individual support. making Katniss a more central figure than she should be at this point. It also shows us how information is managed under an authoritarian regime, what's allowed to be seen, what's cut from the feed, and who's allowed to know the truth. Next time, we'll head into the rest of the Victory Tour and see how Katniss's failure to meet Snow's expectations doesn't just escalate things, it sets her free. Quackers?